Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Rianka, founder of Your Greatest Contribution, on the show today. Rianka discovered financial planning while in college and took a job after graduating with the financial planning firm in the DC area. She was there for about 5 years before getting the itch to do something a little different. She joined another firm and about a year in realized that the only way to really scratch the itch was to start her own firm. We talked about how her service model has changed, which moved her from having basically all of her clients that signed on in the first year leave after 12 months to signing almost 20 clients in the next 12 months, and all of them have stuck with her past the 1-year mark. Like many planners starting firms, Rianka has been approached by several established firms looking to merge her practice in. She gave some great tips for thinking through that decision, when it makes sense for planners, and why ultimately it wasn't the right fit for her. Finally, Rianka is involved in a lot of different projects, one of which is called Trailblazers 2050, which is a diversity and inclusion focused podcast that I highly recommend, and you'll hear more about that during the interview. This month's episodes are brought to you by AdvicePay, the first and only compliant payment processor built specifically for financial advisors. Manage and allow your clients to pay all of your one-time invoices and recurring fees via credit card or ACH. For the first time, advisors can have their clients paying monthly, quarterly, or semi-annually without having to log in and make payments every time. Multi-advisor firms can take advantage of the enterprise version, which allows the firm to manage payments and invoices across all of their advisors. All of this while never triggering custody. See it for yourself by signing up for a 14-day free trial of the platform at www.advicepay.com. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/162. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's a community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Rianka. Hey, Rianka, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for having me.
So I have to say, you are a very busy woman because I think I have courted you longer than anyone else to come onto the show. I think I've been trying for like 6 or 9 months to get you on the show. So I'm excited to have you and to be able to talk through all the reasons why you haven't been able to make it on the show because, like I said, you are more than a little busy. So just to give listeners an introduction to you, if they haven't met you before, tell me a little bit about sort of your firm, number of clients, where you're located, and then we'll dig into the details.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. It's so funny, Alan. I think the same of you. I think you are all over, not only the U.S., but internationally. So I'm happy we were able to coordinate schedules. So I am the founder and president of Your Greatest Contribution, or YGC. And I have a little over 20 clients now, and I am in Maryland, or right close to the DC. We call it the DMV area.
DMV, Metro?
Yeah, DC, Maryland, Virginia, DMV.
Oh, yeah. That's just what you want to be associated with is the DMV. I like it.
Right. I know. And it's so funny. When I used to have a co-working space, I used to work out of WeWork when I first started my firm. I live in Maryland. I have to drive through DC just to get to Virginia. And it's 20 minutes away, but it's so weird. It's like the norm up here. So I'm based in Maryland. That's where my home is, but my firm is virtual. I do not meet with any of my clients in person. I don't care if you live down the street. If we meet in person, it's going to be for social. It's going to be just a, hey, what's up? How's it going? How was vacation? Or, just, let your hair down and, get comfortable. Not necessarily how did your investments do? Or, let's talk about that estate planning thing. I never want clients to kind of like, oh no, I'm too busy for lunch. Nobody is busy for lunch. I know why you're, you're pushing me off. So I made that a rule that I don't talk business during social hours with clients. We only talk fun.
So when did you launch your firm?
December 2015
wow,
is when
has it
I
been
launched.
That long? Oh man,
it's been
that 2.5 years.
2.5 years. And Alan, I would tell you, sometimes people ask me like, what I definitely have my reasons on why I started, but it was a seed that you planted with me. And I don't even know if you remember this. I think this was back in 2013 or 2014 at a gathering.
So it was Next Gen Gathering. Was that in Moline?
Moline, yeah. When I got attacked by a whole bunch of insects. It was the baseball game. Do you remember that?
I do. I do.
Oh my gosh. And everyone thought it was normal. Like all, these insects are hatching, and I turned into a straight city girl. I thought I was country until that day. I turned into a straight city girl. I was like, I have to go. But it was at lunch. And I remember this like it was yesterday. And you poured so much into me that day. I'm just like, Rianka, I just see so much potential in you. And, what is right now, you are living your plan B. What if you just live your plan A, right? And so what if it doesn't work? Just go back to your plan B. You're doing it anyway now. I was like, mind blown. I was like, wow, you are right.
Isn't it funny how, and you may have heard that 20 times before. It's always funny to me how the way one person words something gets through to us. And, it's just that moment of like, huh, because I don't know if I should say this. I don't mean to catch to get myself in trouble with not wording things correctly, but there's something, and this is pure anecdotal, but when I've had conversations, like I'll go from a conversation with a successful 30-year-old female with a CFP experience, money saved or side income. All the tools ready to go. And and you were this way. It's like, I'm not sure. Like, I just don't know if I'm ready. And then I'll talk to some like 22-year-old dude, fresh out of college, no credentials, no experience. He's like, I'm going to start a firm. I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing?
Like, no, wait.
But give me your confidence. I'm going to give it to this nice lady over here. And then you go get a job. And I don't know if it's actually gender, or if it's just been my experience, but there's so many folks.
I think it's gender. It's gender, Alan, honestly. And
I think it matters.
It matters. And it matters that we pointed out and you shared that with me too at that point. And I'm like, man, what is it that's in me that's so scared? And I don't know if it's a woman thing where we want to make sure everything's perfect. There are some studies that are shown that we want to make sure we're 85 to 100% ready before we raise our hand or before we put ourselves up to promotion. Whereas men, it's like 60%. As long as they have 60% of whatever qualities or qualifications that's on this paper, they'll just apply, or they'll just, apply for that promotion. So I think it's a great point of just saying sometimes women needs that extra push and that extra just seed of encouragement.
It has nothing to do with skill set or experience. It has everything to do with confidence, which is, and that's something that I think we can all continue to address is calling out skills and success when we see it. I think just as humans, we're not good at saying like, hey, you're doing a really great job. Like you're crushing it in your career, and like you really should be pushing yourself. Don't get stagnant. Don't go into coast mode. But anyway, so taking a step back, talk to me through sort of your career into planning, because you started, you got your degree in financial planning, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I stumbled upon personal finance at Virginia Tech. So Virginia Tech has a CFP board registered program. And I was one of those students. I'm a first generation college graduate. My family thought I made it once they dropped me off in Blacksburg, Virginia. Little did they know I was going to have 4 long years of just hard work. But so, there wasn't an expectation of what I needed to major in or anything. It was just like, we're happy you're there and, do whatever makes you happy. And so what made me happy at that time was math. I had a very strong skill set in math. And so I went to be a math major. Took a couple of classes like my sophomore year where we were getting into some really high caliber math. I was like, nope, this is not for me. So I started taking some elective courses, and then I came across I can't remember what it was called, but let's call it Personal Finance 101. And it was there where I learned about credit scores, credit reports, how your credit score is derived, disability insurance, life insurance, like literally the whole 9 yards. And my eyes just lit up. I was never late for that class. I was always present. And afterwards, towards the end of the semester, I went up to the professor. I was like, listen, I need more of this. Like, can I take more of these classes? And he said, yeah, actually we have a whole, curriculum on this. It's the CFP board, certification track, it's in the business school, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, sign me up. Like that day I went to my guidance counselor, whatever they're called in college. I was like, listen, I need to switch majors. Tell me what I need to do. And that's where my love of personal finance came. It's like truly making a tangible impact in people's lives. Like at that moment, when I started learning about student loans and the interest rates and how they work, I started sharing it with my peers and my friends while we're in college. And then I became like the personal finance guru in college, and still to this day. And that's how I get most of my clients, is just through, a synonym with Rianka is personal finance.
So only I'm trying to remember the official number. CFP board would have to correct me on this. Something like 13% or 15% of folks that graduate with a degree in financial planning ever sit for and pass the CFP.
Wow.
So it's really, really low, which has been one of the concerns. It's like, how heavily do we invest in college programs if they never go on to get the CFP? And I think some of those folks, I think just they get their degree, it's really interesting, but they never see themselves as the advisor. I mean, did you see yourself as the, lead planner, first chair advisor, business development, doing the financial planning? Like, did you see that from yourself, or did that take a while, I guess, to develop that vision for yourself?
I would say after the internship, I knew that's where I wanted to be, but I just knew it was going to take some time, development, skill sets, because it's a craft. I mean, it's one thing knowing the technical skills, but it's a craft. When these lead advisors go into the meetings and speak to the clients. And, I was interning in 2009. So it was like literally right after the market crashed. I started in May with the firm. And so the market, of course, was coming back up from the lowest point in March 2009. And so just to see those conversations and to actually feel like, I can't remember what was said during those meetings that summer, Alan, but I remember the feeling, and just clients coming in with such a sad, depressed face, but walking out with light in their eyes of saying, okay, we will actually live to see another day. And, the world isn't over. And so it was after the internship that I knew that that's where I wanted to be, but I knew that it was going to take some time and development.
I love that, because in going back to gender stereotypes in college, I was like, I'm going to be a lead advisor from day one. It took me a while to realize I wasn't going to be a lead advisor from day one. But, and so I think that's part of, bringing more people into the industry is, one, that we have to instill this, vision of what does it mean to be a financial planner, but also like, there's so many jobs in financial planning that don't involve being the lead advisor. So if that's not comfortable for you, or that's not really where you want to end up, that's okay. We have a lot of other job opportunities, that just across the board that we need filled beyond just lead planner, which is of course also important. But
right. But then also, I know we're preaching to the choir, for most folks who listen to this podcast, but going back to what you just said, you made a really good point of what does a financial planner actually do? So, when I was taking these courses, I almost felt like a teacher, because I'm like, all right, you learn this information and then you teach others. So I didn't know what it was going to actually look like until the internship, until I actually got to see it in action. But I knew for sure if I wasn't going to be a financial planner, I was going to be a teacher of it, just because it was just too good to hold this information hostage. It was just too good of information.
So did you get a job at a financial planning firm then right out of college?
Right out of college. I would say I was also one of the lucky ones with that too. So I was a fall graduate. So the beginning of that fall semester, I actually was offered a job in September, October, and I graduated in December. So I kind of already, my senior year, I could, just coast, not necessarily coast in classes, but coast in like, I got a job after school, so I'm good. But yeah, I started at a fee-only RIA firm in Bethesda, Maryland, the typical traditional firm where the minimum is $1 million in order to take on a client. It was a small boutique firm, probably about 10, 11 folks when I started. The cool thing, and I didn't know it was that cool back then, but it's cool to say now, we were the first generation paraplanners. It was when the term paraplanner was so new. It was like, well, what are paraplanners? And what I appreciated, and which I appreciate more just hearing the stories of paraplanners today and associate planners today, is that the firm I worked for acknowledged, listen, we know we need help. We have a skeleton outline of what we think we can use you for. But we are leaning on you to help us build a career path for you. So we knew kind of like the end goal was going to be that senior planner. It was going to take years to get there. But in between, what does that look like? So yeah, I appreciated the firm for just acknowledging it. So as far as setting expectations and just saying, there was just no confusion. There was no frustration of like, well, I don't know. You're the boss. Like, why don't you know? It's like, hey, we're both coming to the table. We both don't know, but here's what we do know. Here's what we learned in these CFP board registered programs. We do have a lot of the technical skills, but so what are our blind spots? And that's where like my manager and the lead advisors came in and taught us and all that good stuff.
So were you at that firm for your career until you ultimately decided to launch a firm?
I was at that firm for almost 5 years. And then instead of making that leap and starting a firm, I went to a different firm because I thought is what I needed. Like there was something missing that needed to be fulfilled. And I have an issue, Alan, where
many of us do.
We're not perfect creatures, right? So I have an issue that if I see that there's a void or if there's a place where I feel like I can help, I have to help. And if I don't feel fulfilled. I feel sad. I feel like it's just something in me just that will not let it go. And so there were some things I wanted to do at my first firm where we just kind of grew apart. And it's totally fine. Like that firm is awesome. They, they're still thriving today, but we just kind of grew apart. It's kind of like relationships, right? It's, we kind of grew up together, had our pain points, talked through it. And then it got to the 5-year mark and it's just like, well, yeah, I think we're growing apart and that's okay because we're both still growing. It just so happens to be in separate directions. And so I joined the second firm and I was there for a little over a year. And that same feeling, Alan, came back. And I was like, you know what? Instead of jumping to another firm to try to feel fulfilled, let me be single. Instead of being committed to another relationship, let me be single and figure out what this is. And so what it was that I have a passion to help my generation. I have a passion to educate them. And it was playing mind games with me that here we are, we're educating, we're teaching and preaching personal finance and how we need to start at a young age and we're teaching compounding interest. But yet when there's a thriving young professional that comes to us who's earning 6 figures, which is a lot of folks that lives in the DC area, because they don't have a large nest egg, we're not going to work with them. So, but they have the discretionary cash flow to start saving. And in 5 years, 5 to 10 years, they will be that, and I'm putting in air quotes, ideal client that you're looking for today. And so, but these folks are asking for help now. And it was so many of them, Alan, coming to me. And it was colleagues of my husband. It was my friends from college who, the synonym of personal finance is Rianka. And so when they hit that mark, that knowledge gap of, yeah, I'm an expert in what I do at work, but I'm not an expert in personal finance. And, I just got this large promotion and this $50,000 bonus. What should I do? Should I pay off some of my student loans? Should I, put down for a house? Like, what should I do? And it was all of these life stages that we go through in our late 20s and 30s that they were seeking guidance for, and no one was helping them.
You bring up a couple great points in there. Back to your point about having a compulsion or problem, as you say, I'm betting a lot of listeners have that problem. I'll never forget my dad saying, when I was very young, he said, "Alan, just because there's a better way to do something doesn't mean you have to tell people that." Because I was the kid that would correct adults on the best way to do something. And I think it's probably very common with people that, we get this itch. And I think that control is something, decision-making ability, the ability to fix things and iterate is something that drives a lot of folks. And unfortunately, we haven't yet gotten financial planning to a point where we're supporting that desire to tweak and to improve and to iterate. And so folks many times get forced into entrepreneurship, whether they want to be entrepreneurs or not, in order to sort of do the work that they want to be doing. But to your last point, around, wanting to serve your peers, I love it when advisors at conferences, and I know they're being genuine, but they ask me like, what do you do for young people?
Oh my goodness.
Really? What do we not do? What do you do for old people? Like what do you mean?
Right.
For young people?
Alan, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I think it takes more time to work with younger, thriving professionals than it does with retirees. Like with retirees, you can legit have one meeting a year and everything be fine. With my clients, we touch base almost on a quarterly basis just because life is happening. Someone is getting married. Someone is having a baby. Someone is buying a house. Something is always happening, and it's all fun. So we don't subscribe to we'll just meet once a year. If I just met with my clients once a year, Alan, we would literally have a 5-hour catch-up session just to be like, okay, well, what the heck happened over the past 11 months? And it's to your point, well, what didn't happen? And it's so many pivotal points that are happening in their life where we can help change the trajectory. And just imagine how good that feels.
Yeah, and it's things that folks may consider small things, and I'm in air quotes as well, like small things like helping someone, negotiate for a raise, that they get that $5,000 raise. Look at what that does over the course of their lifetime in terms of earnings, because earnings does compound, and just the compounding effects that has. It's huge. Even $1,000 raise today is a massive impact over the course of their life. And it's things like that, like you said, it's fun. They're fun conversations, but it's things that really do lay that foundation for the future for them and help set them up for success.
Yeah. Can I share a story really quick about a client? I'm going to try to hold back tears as I'm sharing this story, because it's just like, wow, what would they have done? Not necessarily without me, but without a planner. So I'm going to share a story about a client of mine. So she's been a client with me for almost a year. She recently got engaged. So her fiance came on as a client, and an awesome opportunity came up. So she's in California. Again, I've clients all over the country, which is so cool. And so she's in California. She sends me this email, urgent is the subject. Rianka, my great-grandmother's house just came back on the market. Now, she is biracial and her mom is from Colombia. So her great-grandmother's home, in which through whatever reason they lost, ownership of this house, it came back on the market, and the owner is selling it. Somehow she found out, I think her aunt still lives there, and she's like, we need to get this home back in the family. She was like, what do I need to do? I'm like, all right. So we find out that I think the owner was selling it for $65,000, which is, and she sent me pictures of the home. I'm like, whoa, if this is $65,000, I need to move to Colombia as well.
No kidding.
And the view, oh my gosh. So we went through various scenarios. It's awesome that, she has great cash flow. We went through scenarios of taking a loan from her 401k. She had a stack of cash. And so we did a combination of pulling a loan from her 401k. She's also in the process of getting married, which she's going to get married in Colombia. And that's going to cost a pretty penny. So we didn't want to use all of her cash. She has a bonus coming in August. So it was like we were throwing out all these scenarios, and I think literally, Alan, this was the quickest home purchase I've ever seen in my life. Within 2 weeks, we got it all settled. She ended up hiring an attorney that dealt with buying real estate out of the country. And so we kind of like all looped. It was like literally a big team effort, but within 2 weeks, we got that. She got the home, and she sent me a picture of her standing on the porch of her great grandmother's home with the title.
Isn't it just amazing? Like when you get to see the fruits of your labor,
Yes.
and get to see what we do in our profession and how amazing it is.
Yes. And she is 33 years old. How amazing is that?
That's awesome.
How amazing is that? And so, I think it was Jude Boudreau who said this: you'll have the highest of highs and lowest of lows in the same day as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And it is so true. And it's those moments I reflect on when I'm having my just very, very low days. I reflect on that, and I reflect on that client, and I'm just like, wow, okay, Rianka, that's why you do what you do.
When people ask, like, what do you do as a financial planner? And they think it's all math or it's all insurance sales. Like, those are the stories that we can tell. And when we say we help people live their great life, that's what we mean. Like, that's her version of a great life. And for others, they may say, like, house in Colombia, why do I care? And fine. That's fine for them. They can do their own thing. But for this client, like, that was unbelievably meaningful, that it may not have been the best financial decision, but it was the best life decision. And that's what we have the opportunity to help our clients accomplish.
Yeah, it was huge, Alan. I have goosebumps thinking about it.
So whenever you made the decision, you said you were at that last firm for about a year, you decided, you were headed down that direction of launching a firm. What, I guess, pushed you over the edge of that versus joining another firm? Because clearly you're highly employable. So, getting a job in financial planning would not be a challenge for you. So was it the conversation that we had, or was there something else that really, I guess, cemented that and helped you realize that was really the path you needed to take?
Our conversation was kind of like the seed that was planted. I don't know if there's any fans of the movie Inception, but so it was kind of like the seed that was planted that was always there. And it was honestly my physical health that made me launch my firm. So after my first firm, so it wasn't a toxic environment. Neither firm was a toxic environment. They're all great people, but it's not where God wanted me to be. And so I have always suffered with migraines. And during the last year I was at my first firm, it was just really bad. And so when I left that firm, it got better. And so I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's what it was. And then certain things started happening at the second firm. And I was just like, I don't know if this is where I'm supposed to be. I have my silent time with myself and I pray. And then the migraines started coming back, Alan. And in so many ways, God had already told me that I wanted you to be alone. Like, I'm going to use you in ways in which I can't if you are confined with the firm. And I didn't listen to him. So I joined the second firm. And then I started to get migraines again. And these migraines were debilitating, where I had to get rushed to the ER multiple times, where just opening my eyes or just being, I was very sick, very nauseous, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. We had to take CAT scans of my brain, and it was really bad. And so at that point in time, I had a conversation with my husband. I was like, Reggie, I just think I'm not supposed to be working for anyone right now. I think that's what it is. And I was like, I've always had this thought that I needed to start my firm, but honestly, babe, I think that's what it is. And so, of course, me being the financial planner, I threw on my financial planner hat and I was like, all right, well, what would it take? And so this was probably about 6 months before I actually left the old firm. And we was like, all right, well, what would it feel like if we lived off of one income? So we started living off of one income and started saving mine. So we were already saving, but now that was just a savings outside of the market. It was like actually cash cushioned savings. for like capital for the firm. So then our lifestyle changed where we didn't go to every brunch we were invited to. We didn't, do things that we would normally do or buy things that we would normally buy. And we're definitely okay with that. And so, a couple months in, I was like, all right, Reggie, how do you feel about this? He's like, I'm fine. I was like, all right, so this is probably how it's going to feel if, I leave corporate America and I start my own firm. What if I don't get a client in the first 6 months? And he's like, well, it seems like I think we'll be okay financially. If we need to dip into our savings and this cash cushion that you're, saving, we should be fine. I'm like, all right. The moment I decided in my head that I was going to leave, I just didn't know when, my migraine stopped, Alan.
That's crazy.
I have not had a migraine, Alan, in almost 3 years.
That's incredible because, like you said, it's not just like a slight headache. It's debilitating.
No, it's debilitating. I have not had one of those in 3 years. And the doctors was just like, well, I guess you're cured, and yeah. And I think it was finally saying, oh, okay, now you're listening to me. It was kind of like God to me, honestly saying, okay, now you're listening. Now I'm not going to put you on your back anymore for you to listen to me. Now I can start to use you. And I think that's why, a lot of people reach out to me and like, Rianka, how do you find success? How are you on this magazine? How was this? How was that? And I was like, listen, it's not me, nor do it's me physically. I'm the vessel, but it's not me, if you know what I mean, Alan. And also, I don't go out seeking that. I don't go out seeking how to be on the top list. I don't go out seeking success. I try to be the best Rianka I can be to my clients, to whomever I engage with, as far as like other advisors who reach out to me. And it just so happens because I love doing what I'm doing and making an impact somehow, that I'm being recognized. It's not that I go out doing it to be recognized. And I think that is the point I be trying to make with advisors when they reach out to me. I know we're kind of going on a tangent of something else. I know you're asking about my firm, but that's a lot of advisors ask me that. And I'm just like, I don't know. There's no secret sauce to this.
No, and I want to dig into some of the things that you've been able to accomplish that you probably wouldn't have been able to do if you've been working at a firm and what all that has looked like. But so you launched the firm December 2015. 15. So we're 2.5 years in now. And so you said just over 20 clients. Can you tell me a little bit just about sort of the structure of your firm, the type of services you offer, if you have a niche market, just sort of how you work with clients?
Yes. So I'm so happy you asked this question because, and I know you preach this, Alan, but I'm a probably be, you might smack my hand, but I didn't, I didn't have a niche when I first started. I thought I knew who I wanted to work with. I was like, oh, maybe doctors and lawyers and consultants, technology consultants like my husband. Then I started working with them. I'm like, no more. Oh, goodness. Opposite attracts in marriage and clients, I don't know if that's a good relationship thing. So I didn't have a niche. I just knew I didn't have a specific profession. It was more so of a personality. And so I needed to talk to the client in order for me to figure out, are we a good fit or not? So when I first started my firm, I did what most XYPNers do, which was the upfront fee, go through the plan, and then the option to retain me after like the first couple months, however long it took to actually get through the plan after kind of like the big picture meeting or the comprehensive plan, excuse me. But what I found was, one, people didn't really, they were sticker shocked about how much it cost, first of all. And then they were like, oh no, I got it. I don't need to pay $200 per month just to implement this stuff. We got it from here. And the funny thing is, Alan, two things would happen when I would reach back out to these clients. One is they wouldn't return my emails. Or two, the ones who actually did were very honest and was like, Rianka, that implementation list that you sent us, we still haven't knocked off one yet. Right. And it's 6 months later because you're busy. That's why you hire me. That's what you're paying me for. One, to nag you. And then two, to make sure things get checked off this list. And so I call it the alpha and beta stage. So the alpha stage of my firm probably lasted a year. And then I kind of wiped all of those clients clean in a sense of like, I think my first year, I maybe had like 25 to 30 clients where it was bringing them on as far as like the one-time engagement with the option to retain. I kept a couple where again, we were a personality match. And then I started honestly fresh in 2017. In 2017, I probably had like 2 clients under my belt. And then I started with the retainer model where the most important phase of the financial planning process is when clients were dropping off in my alpha stage in the implementation. And I said to myself, I was like, I can build the most prettiest financial plan there is with all of the answers and give them the answers to the secret sauce, the blueprint. But if they do nothing with it, then it was all for naught. And honestly, you wasted your money. And so I said, I'm not doing that no more. Any client, any prospect that I spoke to in the beginning, I was like, listen, this is going to be a long-term engagement. I don't have in the contract that they have to stay with me for 12 months. But when I speak to them, I say, this is a long-term relationship and let me explain to you why. And I kind of walk them through the financial planning process. And I actually have a implementation schedule / calendar that I'll send them of saying, this is typically how long it takes. And this is what an implementation phase will look like. And this is what we do. And so they can understand why I'm charging them $4,000. So $4,000 is my minimum for the annual retainer. And so they pay $1,000 per quarter. And and so I've been building my client base from there. And it's been going well. And actually in December 2017, I stopped taking on clients. So I haven't brought on a new client in 7 months. And it's because I'm involved in so many other things. I don't want my quality to, decrease just because I feel like I'm being called to other things.
So I want to emphasize the fact that your service model didn't really change. What changed is how you sold it and how you explain the value. And we see this with a lot of XY members, especially early on when they were launching their firms. They really pushed it as they were great at selling the upfront plan, but they, I guess, weren't as confident as selling the ongoing plan. And that this was not a service overhaul. This was an overhaul in the way that you communicated the value of planning, which is it's not in the plan, it's in the implementation of the plan. And I never worked with a client that self-implemented effectively. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I mean, we don't self-implement ourselves, even as financial advisors, much less our clients.
Right.
And so that, and being confident in saying like, look, the value, and I love the way you framed that the value here is ongoing. So you don't have to put people under contract. All you have to do is say, hey, look, this is an ongoing relationship. The value is going to be that I'm here over time helping you implement the plan. The first part of the plan is just to get started, but we can't stop there. And if you want to stop there, there may be a different advisor that's a better fit for you.
Yeah. And you know what's so funny? I'm thinking about the clients that I've had since last year who, were actually, I was speaking with my assistant this morning and we're scheduling out Q3 meetings for clients. And all of the clients that I had since last year who's been with me over a year, the reason why they first engaged me, we've already accomplished that. And it's a whole set of new things that we're working on. And so it's so funny. And that's what I explained to prospects as well. I was like, our first engagement will probably be this. This is probably the most important thing right now. But what you don't know, what's on the horizon is probably a great promotion. And we're going to need to decide on how do you deal with these RSUs? Should you sell them? Should you, and so it's so funny. It's so funny to think about that. Yeah. We are their angel on their shoulder.
We really are. And, that quarterly meeting is so awesome because, that's, I bet the week before that meeting is when most of the tasks are actually getting implemented, right? That's when they think about it. Cause oh yeah, I got to go see Rianka. I better get some of this done.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to do is, have to show up and not have, anything done. So.
Right. So yeah, we have quarterly meetings with clients. So I kind of explain the process as far as just the evolution of where I am with clients now with the retainer model. And what I found for me that works well for me is that Q1 clients, I found they really want to talk to you. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because it's the new year and it's like new year, new me, new year, new goals. I want to talk to you. And so I make it a point to meet with every client, and we don't physically meet. We meet via video. So I make it a point to meet with every client. Q2 or April, May, and June, I do not meet with clients. However, what I do is still have a quarterly check-in, but it's on making sure that they're sending me their tax returns, reviewing their investments and their 401ks or their TSPs, and seeing if there's any changes that need to be done. So we do meet, but it's an email meeting. And Q2 is when I'm busy, where I'm going to conferences, where I'm speaking. And so it helps. Q3, I'm here, like I'm home. It's July, August, September, right? Yep. July, August, September. And I'm not busy. Like there's typically no conferences that are in July or August. And so I'm meeting with clients now. Like we are having our actual check-in. Q4, oh my gosh, it is so busy. It's the end of the year tax planning. I don't want to meet with clients unless I absolutely have to. And then also it's heavy conference season again. And I've kind of set that expectation up front with clients and am training them. I mean, honestly, like we have to train our clients, or a nicer way of saying that is setting the expectation and just like, listen. And so I sent them out this, and this is something that I've like evolved and kind of grew into and created this calendar, this service calendar, kind of loosely based off of what Michael Kitces has. In December of last year, I sent it all to my clients like, hey, you know, we're going to see how this works this year. You know, again, being very transparent with my clients, so just like, hey, you know, we're going to try it out. We'll see how this works. And then during our Q3 meeting, I'm going to check in with them and seeing like, hey, what's up? So how's it been going? Do you feel like you touched me enough? Am I available when you need me? And so I have very vocal clients though. So if I'm not available, they'll let me know.
So switching gears a little bit, I say a couple months, it's probably been 6 months now that when we had originally tried to get you on the podcast, you had some potential transitions going through the firm where you were having some conversations around potentially merging with another practice versus staying solo. And I know that this is something that a lot of young planners deal with, especially when they're starting practices, is that they get courted by larger firms, existing practices with the allure of a salary and benefits and having to run their own business in exchange for equity, right? Because instead of owning 100% of your business, you may not own any of theirs or a very small percentage. So can you talk me through, I guess, the reason you considered it and what made you consider it, and ultimately what maybe led you to make the decision that it wasn't the right fit for you at this time?
Oh, goodness, Alan. We can have a whole separate episode on this.
So true.
Gosh. All right. I'm going to need you to keep me on track here. All right. So
why consider it in the first place? Why consider it? Clearly an entrepreneur. What was it that was appealing?
You know, it's when you have those low days of just like, oh man, you know, I've worked 80 hours this week and I can't even pay myself, or, you know, it's like one of those, you know, kind of like you get into this mentality of I deserve. I don't know. It's like, it's so much easier. Like this is hard work. It's hard as hell to run a practice, a firm by yourself. I mean, even with support, you are the alpha and omega. Like it's on you for this business to succeed. And sometimes that's a lot of pressure. And like sometimes when you have that silent time with yourself, you actually realize like, wow, like I am a business owner. People rely on me. Whoa. And sometimes it can just get overwhelming. And then it's just like, you know, if you lose a client, you think, well, maybe it's me, you know, and maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. And so you start having these doubts. And as soon as you start having those doubts, a firm will come. And so you're already in a low and vulnerable. And so, you know, the grass starts to look greener on the other side. And you're just like, all right, well, let me see, you know, what they're saying. And firms, they know how to talk a good talk of just like, oh yeah, we want to do virtual and we want to go paperless. And, you know, until you start asking.
Want to be you.
Right. And until you start asking those tough questions to these firm owners or the shareholders of the firm, like, are you actually willing to pivot? And most aren't, because most are the Titanic. They are an unsinkable ship in a sense of, if the iceberg was coming, Titanic is one of my favorite movies. We see the iceberg coming, right? We're on the Titanic. We see it coming, but we can't pivot quick enough. And so we still hit it. So that's these large RIA firms who they see me and they're just like, oh yeah, we want to do what you're doing. Or they see a firm like mine. Yeah, we want to do what you're doing. And then when it comes time to pivot, it's like, oh, wow. So have we even moved 2 degrees to the north yet? Like what are we doing here? And it's just so slow. And being an entrepreneur, we survive on being agile, on, okay, this doesn't work, let's pivot. Oh, this client, okay, there's a couple things that clients are, okay, that was consistent, let's pivot. So we have that ability to pivot. And so I've been pivoting, not often, but if I need to pivot, I can. And so going into a situation or going to a firm where it's like all of the 10 shareholders need to be on board before we pivot, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. So it's a me thing too. It's like, am I willing to give up that creative freedom that I have now for whatever it was that I was looking for? So going back to that why, right? And so it's been a couple of firms where there's been some negotiating as far as just like, what would it look like? And ultimately, I think right now, for the season I'm in my career, I belong right where I am.
I think, you make a great point that it's the days where it's the low days. And quite honestly, you can have a low day on a day where you get 3 clients and you're making a bunch of money, right? Like this isn't.
You can. Oh my gosh, Alan. Oh, are you living my life right now, Alan?
I am. I'm an entrepreneur too. I get it.
You can land 3 new clients and still be having a shitty day. Like it could be probably like, oh my gosh. Like I honestly had one of those. I can remember that day. I was just like, my husband came home. He was like, oh, you got 3 new clients. That's awesome. I'm like, why do you seem so sad? I'm like, I don't know. Like, give me a cookie.
It's so true. And that is, Jude's quote, which, listeners have heard often from me as well. I just love it because it's so true that you have to be ready for the emotional roller coaster. And it is easy to start looking at other opportunities whenever you see a nice salary there that's available. But, it all comes back to what's your why? Like, why did you start this firm in the first place? And can you accomplish that at another firm? And sometimes the answer is yes. If you started a firm because you couldn't find a good fit and you just want to do real financial planning and a real financial planning firm comes along and offers you a job, okay, there's no judgment in accepting that position. But you may have, and in your case, I think this is definitely true, you may have started the firm for a different reason to be able to accomplish something else that is pretty hard to accomplish when you're on the Titanic, right? Like you got to be on a jet ski to do some of the things that you're doing and compliance not lose their minds.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And going back to your point, as far as just like, you start your firm and then there's another firm that comes by and offer you an awesome deal. I spoke to 2 young planners, I think it was a couple weeks ago. It's a firm up in New Jersey, I believe. And their owners, I think they saw me speak somewhere and they were like, you need to reach out to Rianka to see what she's doing, how she's running her firm and all this good stuff. So they reached out to me, and their firm is allowing these planners, these young planners, to bring on a small number of young professionals where they're going to try to do the retainer model. I explained to them how I do it and kind of like what type of meetings that they will be having and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, that right there is the future of the financial planning profession. That right there. And I was like, and I told these 2 young planners, I was like, I don't know if you know this, but this isn't normal. Like what the firm owners are allowing you to do right now, this isn't normal. So I don't know if you told them thank you And if you did, you probably don't know what you were thanking them for. So let me break this down to you, and I, kind of share it with my story and a couple other stories. Like, so you probably need to go in there and just say thank you one more time. They're like, wow, Rianka, thank you so much. I'm like, yeah, because a lot of young planners who want to work with their peers can't. And to your point, are pushed into becoming entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's something that, to your point, if you're in that situation, congratulations, because it is an awesome opportunity. And we hope to see more of those, but it's been slow coming. So one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about was also, I guess, around the time that some of these merger conversations were happening, was you embarked on a new project that you had reached out to me about, and it is now sort of, I guess, in the middle. It's been launched, and I just want to get an update on where things are at. So that's the 2050 Trailblazers project. So can you talk to me about what that is for listeners that haven't heard of it, and really why you've been committing so much time and energy towards this initiative, this project?
Yes. So 2050 Trailblazers is a podcast, and we just wrapped up season 1, which, woohoo!
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're going to launch season 2 in September. And so 2050 Trailblazers came about because, over the years, I've been asked to address some concerns around like diversity and inclusion. And, if I walk into a conference room, I kind of stick out, Alan. I'm, brown, I'm a woman, and I'm young. So I'm all three when it comes to the minority in the financial planning world. And so people will always ask me like, well, what can we do? And, how do we get more women? How do we get more young professionals? How do we get more Black and brown people in the financial planning world? And I was running away from those conversations, Alan, running away from those conversations. Cause I was like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable, Alan. It is so uncomfortable. And so I was just like, you know what? Then I started seeing conversations pop up where it was like one conversation at a conference that happened once a year, or one episode on a podcast out of a whole year, or one this, one that. And because the conversations were happening so sporadically and so far apart, when there was an opportunity to actually discuss this, to discuss women in financial planning or Black and brown people in financial planning, and some of the nuances that come with being a professional of color or being a woman professional in this profession, the conversations were so tense. It was so tense. And so I thought to myself, well, what if there was a platform where it wasn't a once a year type of thing, but it was year round, where there is space to have these conversations and where you can hear and learn from different perspectives. Because what I think we do in the financial planning world and as financial planners is so very unique. Like, our job is to listen to clients. Our job is to listen, to figure out what their values are, to figure out what their goals are. And our job is to become a partner with them and help them achieve those goals. The one thing that I would love for the financial planning profession to do better is to learn about each other. So learn about someone who doesn't look like you, to learn about their values, their cultures, because what we'll learn from clients is that depending on their culture is how or why their money scripts came about, or how and why they deal with money, or how and why, if you pull education off of the client's goals list, because it's like, oh no, you need to focus on retirement versus paying for college for your child. And depending on the culture, that is disrespectful because they value that more than retirement. Now, to us in America, is like, oh, of course, you want to make sure you retire, forget your kid, not forget your kid, but but listening to them, we learn, right? And so I'm just like, what if we did that often? Like, how better could this be? And anytime I saw on like message boards or in groups, it was always, well, what about me? Well, what about me? And I'm just like, if you're still in that, well, what about me mentality, that means you're truly not listening. And so Alan, I tried to run away from this. I was like, no, God, I have too much on my plate right now. I run a firm. I am running a business. And so this was last year. And so I was like, all right. So I sat quietly. I started to get a migraine, Alan. That's when I knew I had to do this and I couldn't run away from it. I almost got a migraine. And so I was like, all right, God, I hear you loud and clear. I'm going to do it. And so then I started thinking about like, well, what does this look like? Because I didn't know if it was going to be a YouTube channel. I didn't know what it was going to be. And then a podcast just seemed convenient for everybody, convenient for listeners, convenient for me because I'm always traveling, convenient for any guests that I bring on. They can be in their PJs talking to me. I don't care. What I cared about was the message. And so I curated season 1. I thought about who were great people just to lay down the foundation for season 1. And I was so lucky to get people like Cy Richardson, who's the vice president of the National Urban League, Lizetta Rainey Braxton, who has been in the profession, been a mover and shaker in the profession for over a decade. Well, for 20 years, I believe, but owned her firm for over a decade. Fong Long, who is a FPA Diversity Scholarship recipient. She's a next gener, sharing her story. I mean, it's just so many awesome people I was able to just to lay the foundation. And what has happened, Alan, has been very shocking to me.
I'm hoping it's a good way, not shocking in a bad way, because this could go either way.
No, shocking in a good way is that people are actually reaching out and it's expected. And it's kind of like when you talk about D&I, the hope, D&I, diversity and inclusion. When you talk about D&I, the hope is that you're not preaching to the choir. The hope is that I'm just not, all my listeners are not Black and brown people or just women. That's the hope. The hope is that it's men listening and that it's white men listening. And with the first episode that dropped, I'm not going to say any names, but white men were reaching out to me saying, Rianka, let me know how I can help. And I was like, what?
That's awesome.
Wow. And women, white women were reaching out. And we're going to actually have a conversation about this on season 2 about how this all came about. And it's beautiful conversations. It's conversation of like, well, I didn't know I could, kind of like speak up for you. I didn't know, was it my place to? And the conversation I had with this woman who's a friend. And I said, well, let's think about the Me Too movement right now, right? So women, we have been fighting for so long with the right to vote years ago, and fighting for our right to vote, fighting just for we should be able to wear what we want to wear and not get sexually harassed and all of this. And though we were being heard, we really weren't being listened to until men stood in and started speaking up with us. And I was like, that's the same thing when it comes to diversity and inclusion, specifically talking about people of color in the financial planning world. Like, it's expected for me to talk about diversity. It's expected to me to be on a panel talking about diversity and inclusion and my experience. But what's not expected is there to be all white men on a panel talking about people of color and why it's important and how, there are some nuances in acknowledging it. And I was like, so very similar with the Me Too movement, it can't be all women standing up for women's rights. It has to be men too. And very similar with the, diversity and inclusion movement that's happening in the personal finance world, in the financial service industry as a whole. It can't just be Black and brown people standing up talking about, hey, there are some differences.
No, and especially in our industry, because I was pulling up some of the CFP board's numbers, and I commend them for releasing this data, because I can imagine if this was our data, I would not want to release it. But less than 3.5% of all CFPs are Black or Latino. 80,000 CFPs, less than 3.5%. And so Blacks and Latinos can do everything they can to be supportive and to try to push this industry forward. But ultimately, it's white guys that are doing the hiring, because they're the majority of the industry. And so, to your point, I've always been told that diversity initiatives can't be led by a white man, but they need to be supported by white men, because we all need to be supportive, but it can't be led by, I can't be the face of a diversity initiative, but I can sure as heck do everything that we can to promote and, do what we can to give a voice. So, And I think that I personally think that's true. I mean, everyone has a different opinion, but one of the things that you mentioned in there, and I think this is important because this is hard. Brian Thompson last year at our conference was on a diversity panel. And one of the things that he said was he doesn't want to be the guy that constantly gets asked as a Black man how to fix racial issues. He's like, yes, I'm Black, but it doesn't mean like I'm the guy that wants to sit here and have a conversation with every single, white financial advisor that wants to learn more. Like, it's not my job to teach you. It's not my duty to teach you, if you will. And that resonated. And something you said in there as well is, you're naturally going to get pulled into these conversations. I mean, because I imagine, women of color in financial planning, I mean, it's probably less than 1%. If you take 22% of less than 3.5%. So you're naturally just going to get asked, hey, how do we solve this? And that as a white male, be cognizant of the fact that not every Black person or every woman wants to have that conversation and try to inform you how you can help. So it's not a given that you have to have that conversation, which I know it doesn't get approached that way, but I do understand it and I'm guilty of that myself. So,
and while we're on this, I'm very sensitive when we talk about this because diversity has many different layers. There's so many different facets when it comes to diversity. Right now, we're talking about racial, right? And where I hear the what about me when it comes from, the majority that I've seen it, if I do get any hate mail, it's from white men. It's like, well, what about me? And it's like, well, we're not talking about social, economic diversity right now. We're just talking about racial. Like, let's try to focus on that really quickly.
One problem at a time.
One problem at a time.
Yeah. And I get that. I mean, I grew up fairly poor and I've definitely been guilty at times of being one that stood like, well, you don't know where I came from. Don't tell me I have privilege. You don't know where I came from. You don't know if I had any advantages. And, you have to check yourself and say like, you know what, let's just assume for a second that the person on the other side of the microphone is not an idiot. Let's just assume that they actually have a valid opinion and have a right to an opinion and try to hear it. You don't have to agree with it, but just try to hear it. And that can be really tough whenever you feel like, well, I'm not a trust fund kid, so therefore don't tell me I have privilege. It's like, well, we all have privilege. Some of us just have more of it, and some of us just have different kinds of it. And when we're talking about racial and gender, if you're white or a male, you have privilege just naturally because of the way our culture is. It doesn't mean that someone doesn't have more privilege than you in another area that's separate from racial or gender, which I love your point there, that there's many different facets to diversity. Those are two of them.
Right. Yes. You said it very beautifully, Alan. Very beautifully. Thank you. And I'm sensitive. I come from a good place. And I think that's the reason why I was picked for this, in a sense, of 2050 Trailblazers, is because my heart is in a good place. And I do care. And I care about what Black and brown people say. I care about what white people say. And you know what, Alan, I was going to say the funny part, but it was so hard for me to say white people or Black and brown people, like on my podcast. And you'll hear earlier episodes, like episode 1 or 2, where you'll hear me either be very faint with it or pause. And it's because I had to get comfortable with it. And Fong is who taught me, like, if we're going to truly tackle diversity, we have to be very clear and we have to say the words. We can't use code words to talk about diversity, right? We have to name it. And so I've gotten comfortable over the past few months just actually saying those words out loud and not in my head.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but Black or brown or African American, it's really, I still am challenged to figure out what to say sometimes, because we've had folks on the podcast that may look Black and aren't, may look African American, but are not African American. They may, we had Bill Simonet, who's Haitian American, and
totally different.
Yeah, very different. You cannot, that is not African American. And so, just figuring out what's comfortable and recognizing that if you mean well, you're probably okay. You may get slapped on the hand and say like, hey, that's offensive or that's not worded properly. But, if you're coming at it from a negative place, then, deserve to get your hand more than your hands on. So that is what it is. But so where can folks learn more about the 2050 Trailblazers project? Where can they go to learn more?
2050trailblazers.com.
And I'm assuming if they Google that or your name, it will pop up as well. So it was a 8-episode first season, and then second season you said it's coming in September?
And coming in September, and it's going to be 8 with a bonus. So my I know, Alan, my last episode with Katie Osberger was so darn good, where we actually talked about the implementation of everything that we talked about over the season, about hiring practices, how to identify unconscious bias. What would the world look like with a woman-centric workspace? And then I challenged her and was like, all right, let's talk specifically about financial planning, because she has an HR background. She has no idea. She does not come from financial planning, which was so beautiful because we actually it was kind of like a working session episode of like, all right, well, what would it look like? Right. And so episode 8 actually has a part 2 where it's a bonus episode. So episode 9, and it's amazing. It is amazing, Alan.
Well, so check out the podcast. I give everyone permission to skip the next episode of XYPN Live or XYPN Radio. Go listen to episode 8 and 9.
Thank you.
If you want to get the implementation side, you'll probably want to go back and read the rest. Also, for listeners, I'll put in a plug for XYPN Live. Come out to our conference. We have a pre-conference with one of our keynote presenters, Audra Hannon, who serves on a CFP Workforce Initiative board that I'm on. And I met her and was just blown away by her expertise on diversity and inclusion. And so she's going to be doing a pre-conference workshop for everyone that wants to do a deep dive, and then also a keynote presentation on the topic and around what can we do and how can we help and why does it matter? Does it matter and how to implement? So if this is an area where you'd like to learn more, definitely consider coming out to the conference for all the listeners that are on the fence about it. So that's
going to be phenomenal.
Rianka, we have run way over, which I love, and I totally expected. So with you, because I know we could host several episodes on these various topics. So as we're sort of wrapping up, we'll put a bow on it with the final question, and that is, you're 2.5 years into your business, you've gone through a lot, you're doing a lot. If there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, that one piece of advice that listeners can latch onto, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
Oh, goodness. And I know you asked this question, and I'm just like, I'm going to be prepared. And I'm just like,
it doesn't help. No one's ever prepared. And then they stall just like you're doing now while you come up with a better answer.
One piece of advice. Understand that you can never be duplicated. And you are you, and that is your power. And if for any reason you start to doubt yourself, if you start to doubt the road that you have taken, always go back to your why. And I think that's what has helped me through this almost 3-year journey, is just remembering those things, that no one else is Rianka, and I'm put here on this earth for a reason. And same for you. You are put here on this earth for a reason. And if you do not fulfill your destiny, wow, the world is going to miss out. The world is going to miss out.
Oh, I love it. I think that's so awesome. Well, Rianka, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your path and some of the things you're working on. And I hope listeners will follow up and check out the 2050 Trailblazers podcast and hopefully learn more and see where you're putting your time and energy. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Alan.
This month's episodes were brought to you by AdvicePay, the final piece of the puzzle of how to implement a fee-for-service financial planning program at your firm. Getting paid while avoiding custody is necessary to offer services to clients that don't yet have assets being managed by the firm. See it for yourself by signing up for a 14-day free trial of the platform at www.advicepay.com. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.